and welcome back to Life's Biggest Questions. Today we are continuing our war series by asking, what if Hitler was president of the United States? Of course, this question poses many problems. Hitler died in 1945, a generation far removed from our current era. And of course, Adolf Hitler was a German national and would not be eligible to be president of the United States. Instead, in this question, let us imagine that a man, like Hitler, similarly jilted by economic decline, was able to take power in America and hold onto it for more than the usual term. What would the world be like now? We will answer this question in relation to Hitler's policies around the time of his death and how these would be translated in the United States. Let's start with the good before we descend into the awful. If Hitler was leader of the United States instead of Germany, it's quite probable that the US would have won the space race even quicker. There is strong evidence to suggest that Hitler and Nazi Germany were developing their own space program over a decade before the United States started. With Hitler's focus on intergalactic exploration, perhaps we would be further down the line in discovering the answers to the universe than we are now. One of Hitler's main focuses, despite his misguided approach in the Third Reich, was the strength of his nation and his people. Somewhat like Trump's rhetoric of Make America Great Again, Hitler wanted to make Germany great again, but actually, he wouldn't have outsourced production of his propaganda hats to China. Hitler would have focused on attempting to make the United States a strong and stable economy and would have introduced worker benefits like cars and holidays, but of course, instead of rewarding his people with Volkswagens, it would have been Fords. Speaking of cars, Hitler was a big fan of roads. A lot of American roads are in a very poor state at the moment, and if his Autobahn project was anything to go by, that wouldn't be the case if he was prez. America is very sport-orientated as it is, and this would be much the same if Hitler was president. That said, he preferred shows of strength over ball games. Also, the commercials running would likely not be for Wild Wings or Bud Light, instead for Nazi propaganda pieces, or whatever his American equivalent would be. Speaking of wings, the diet of the American people would likely be very different. Hitler was a vegetarian, and he believed in healthier food farmed from the land, so you can kiss tinned cheese and McDonald's goodbye. If Hitler had ever got so far as to encourage his own diet on his people, it's likely that farming and dairy would not be the leading American industry it is today. Despite a number of sources discussing Hitler's peculiar sex life and his own lack of children, Hitler's regime actively encouraged family life. Hitler believed a woman's place was in the kitchen and a man should be out at work. Of course, these ideas were shared in the civilized world in the 1960s, but with Hitler in charge of the free world, perhaps they would have hindered progression for longer. Now we reach Hitler's flawed relationship to the church. Whilst born a Christian, there is overwhelming evidence to suggest that Hitler only ever used the church as a political prop, rather like the fictitious Frank Underwood. It is thought by most historians that once his power was consolidated, he would have tried to downplay the role of church in people's lives, focusing on building support and adoration for his regime instead. So far, the picture of America seems not so bad under Hitler's rule, but here is where things get nasty. While German Hitler sought to eliminate what he called the burden of European Jewry, an American Hitler arguably would not have had the same focus. If an American-style Hitler had emerged from the right, this is speculation, but it is entirely possible that they could have taken issue with black progression and felt a sympathy with the Confederates following the Civil War. We don't know. But if American Hitler's views were as warped as German Hitler's were in regards to the Aryan race, then maybe. Suffice to say, immigration would have probably been tighter than ever. Of course, there is the Cold War, a large part of America's history. If a Hitler-like figure had ruled America rather than Germany, Russia could have been even stronger than it was when it was a restraining factor in Europe, which could have meant that the Cold War ended in hot war, and instead of the Unites dropping the bomb on Japan, it could have been Russia. Of course, if American Hitler was anything like German Hitler, he would rule through fear and corruption. Remember Night of the Long Knives. Homosexuals would be targeted, as would those with disabilities, and of course those who publicly disagreed with him and his party. Hitler had no problem with killing his opposition or those who threatened his values. Think 1984, but actual 1984, some 50 years into Hitler's rule. While some aspects of Hitler's rule could have been great on the surface for America, as JFK so eloquently put it, the rights of every man are diminished when the rights of one man are threatened. America may be a prosperous country if Hitler ruled, but it would not be free. And isn't freedom what the country was founded upon? Thanks for tuning in to this hypothetically focused episode of Life's Biggest Questions. Do let me know what you thought to this video in the comments section down below. For now, remember to stay curious, stay alert, and never ever stop questioning.